I'm here with Beth Sevilla. She's actually the school counselor at Hampton Park Christian School. But before she was the counselor and before she was on staff, she was a parent. First had her kids at public school and then eventually Hampton Park, and now she's on staff. And here to ask her some questions about that journey and about how she ended up at Hampton Park. Beth, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
You and your husband were both in ministry for many years before coming to Hampton Park. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And we all know that you don't tend to get rich in ministry.
It's true.
Right? At least not the ministries that I'm familiar with. So you had kids in public school. Is that right?
Yes.
What was that like?
Yeah, so, we actually had a pretty positive experience in public school. Several of our kids' teachers were Christians, but as my oldest got into the upper elementary age, we started to see some things coming home that we knew we weren't real comfortable with and knew that were going to have an impact on her. And actually things that she came home and started expressing frustration with, not feeling like her beliefs as a Christian were being respected. She had a teacher who actually doing a lesson about Christian missionaries and talked about how Christian missionaries were really concerned with profit making and soul saving. And so she knew that wasn't true, but for us, it just kind of created this awareness that she was probably going to be confronted with some things that would challenge her as a person and as a believer. And we wanted to be able to frame those things, especially in those early years, in a way that were truthful, but also not hostile to Christianity.
Right. So you started thinking about Hampton Park. I think you already had some connections at Hampton Park.
Yeah, that's right. So my sister has been the 5th grade teacher, Amy Saldivar, at Hampton Park for about 10 years. And so Hampton Park was always on our radar. I would have loved for my kids to have, started there at the very beginning, but we just knew, and I think we had even looked at it years ago when our oldest, so we have a son who's 24, who's adopted, and we had looked at Hampton Park when he was in high school, but just it was not in the cards at all financially at the time. And so it was always something that we knew we would love to do, but couldn't afford financially.
So you and Rich started praying about it, thinking about Hampton Park, eventually came in and I think took a tour. Is that right? Tell us about your experience as a tour.
Yeah, so we brought the kids and got to go on a tour with Jamie, and it was during COVID, so there wasn't a lot going on at the school at the time. We already knew, again, the school somewhat because we'd been to Christmas programs, my nieces attend there, but it was great. I think really affirmed for us that was where we would love to have the kids go if the Lord would provide a way for them to be there.
So you applied for financial aid, thinking maybe you could get your oldest in, I think is how that went. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so Claire was actually at a different school than our younger two kids, and we just kind of went into it thinking, well, maybe we can get her there, and then maybe eventually the younger two can join her. And so ended up applying for the financial aid, just praying that the Lord would provide for that. And it came back in such a way that felt like we could make it work for all three of them. It was definitely a stretch, but the Lord took care of us and took care of the needs of getting them there. And so we were just really thankful for that.
Tell us about the impact that Hampton Park has had on your kids now that you've been there for, I think, 5 years or so?
Yeah, this is their 5th year. So I love the culture of relationships that the staff has with the students at Hampton Park. My kids knew their teachers, but the real intentional way that teachers seek to get to know the students and have relationships with them that are meaningful has just been really influential on my kids. Going through some of those middle school years, which are really tough, and having teachers who, you could sit and eat lunch with them in their classes because you were having a hard day or needed to talk about something. Teachers who I know were praying for my kids to help them get through some difficult situation has just been really impactful, and I know helped them grow in their love for the Lord and their walk with Him.
Talk to me about friendships. What have you noticed about their friends here?
Yeah, so for me, that's one of the most impactful things that especially my older kids have experienced, being able to, and we've kind of watched this progression because she's now a junior, and seeing these kids who, as 7th and 8th graders were probably believers, but not really taking their faith super seriously, but now have really engaged with that on a different level, and having friends who you can talk to about things that you're struggling with or ways that the Lord is working in your life, or, what you're reading personally in your devotions, things like that has just been a really meaningful thing for them to have friends that they know that they can talk to about their relationships with the Lord.
Yeah, very cool. So if you were talking to somebody else in your position from 5 or 6 years ago that sort of is moderately comfortable with public schools, they know that maybe there's a better option, but it doesn't seem financially feasible, what would your encouragement to them be?
Yeah, I guess I would start with, sometimes you don't know what the Lord's going to do until you kind of step out in faith and seek, His guidance and His provision. And so for us, like I said, we had looked a long time ago, but it just seemed like it was not even possible. And so to pursue it again and see the Lord really kind of provide in a big way for us, that was just an encouragement to our faith. And I think it was well worth whatever sacrifices because, there's so much you don't keep in this life. And yet the investment that we make in our kids and their relationships with the Lord, that's eternal stuff. And so even making the financial sacrifice to have them there was to me so worth whatever we financially lost by having them there. And just the relationships that they have are so valuable, both with teachers and with their peers.
Let me ask you a different question that's maybe a change of topic. What would you say to somebody that maybe is in the opposite position? They frankly have some discretionary income and they're thinking about opportunities. There are lots of people that will take donations, lots of organizations, lots of good organizations. Hampton Park, of course, has the endowment that is earmarked for student aid that helps families that could otherwise not afford to send their kids to Hampton Park. There are other ways to give directly to the school as well. What would you say to them that are thinking about where to invest their money for eternity?
Yeah. So, if you think about, there are lots of ways, obviously, that you can invest in kingdom type work, but investing in the Christian education and discipleship of students who then can use what they've learned at Hampton Park, loving and leading and serving, take that, to serve somewhere else and have future impact on other people, I think is such a valuable way for people to consider giving. There are so many people who would love to have their kids there who will never be able to afford it. And that's not necessarily because they aren't working hard or haven't done well, but for some people, if they're serving in some lower pay type ministry, sometimes it's just not in the cards. And so to be able to minister to those people by giving to the endowment is just a really neat way to minister to both children and their families.
Some people watching this conversation are probably not familiar with Hampton Park, and maybe they're thinking about sending their kids, or maybe they're thinking about supporting the school. Where would they go to learn more?
So they can go to hamptonpark.school and see more about the school there.
Very good. Thanks for meeting with me.
Yes, thanks.